Thank you very much. I'm very happy indeed to be here. Very honored to close this great conference, and personally happy. I was waiting for this rendezvous since 2 years. I was invited exactly 2 years ago for a great conference on anti-Semitism in Jerusalem, and I had to cancel it at the very last minute because the organizer of the conference invited at the last minute some people in France with whom I did not wish to share the stage, Representative Mr. Jordan Bardella and Mrs. Marion Maréchal Le Pen, who were leaders of the extreme right-wing party in France. And it was for me a real problem of consciousness, a real question of self-conscious to attend in these conditions. So that day, I remember, I made a statement in France, I think in the Israeli press also, saying that, of course, I was waiting for an opportunity to repair that. I was waiting for a great stage in Israel in order to resume the conversation on anti-Semitism, and that's why when your invitation came, I was so happy, so enthusiastic at accepting it and doing that with enthusiasm. And by the way, it was not at that time, it was not a question of sectarism or whatever. It wasn't a question of right and left. The fight against anti-Semitism is a fight which is shared by should be shared by everyone, which has nothing to do with political borders. The real question at that time, and it's important also to know that today, the real question at that time for me was the following. When somebody has made all his career, when a party in France, in Germany, wherever, has made all its career on anti-Semitism, and when this party changes and breaks with anti-Semitism, it cannot just be a political decision. It cannot just be a statement. It cannot just step out from a political bureau decision. To break with anti-Semitism is, of course, always possible, wishable and possible. And we know in history, and even sometimes in our entourage, some people who did that, who were anti-Semite and who stopped to be. But in between, there is a long, difficult, deep work of understanding, of self-criticizing, of digging in the hell, in the horrible mines of hatred which are inside the minds or the political tradition of those who were bred in anti-Semitism. And if you don't do this work, if you don't make this effort, if you don't accept the pain of going deep into yourself, okay, you can say, I changed, I'm no longer, but it's very fragile. And this sudden alliance with Jews or with Israel is a very fragile, superficial alliance which can be wiped off, which can be erased very easily. And you cannot just trust someone who asks us to believe him when she or he says, it's over, I'm not. It's suppose it is a long path toward what Gershom Scholem called, addressing Hannah Arendt, Ahavat Israel. Ahavat Israel is a question of knowledge, of heart, of reflection of yourself. It's a long, long trip. It is the longest, one of the longest journeys ever. The journey who leads you from anti-Semitism to the criticism and to the abandonment, to leave the anti-Semitism. So I'm so happy to be here today in an assembly of researchers, of scholars, of committed academics who know what they are speaking about since 3 days and whom I'm very, very happy to address. I would like to make a second remark before starting our session of Q&A. The question of the words, the question of the definition, the question of the new anti-Semitism, which has been, I know that, I was told, at the center of your debates since 3 days. I am like you, Mr. Mayor, I'm an old man. I'm a little younger than you, but not much. I'm 78 years old, 77. And 50 years ago, I wrote in the preface, the foreword of one of my first books, I wrote the following: 50 years, 5 decades. I wrote that of course, anti-Semitism has changed form. It is like a virus who mutes, who changes at every generation, and so on and so on and so on. And I already concluded 50 years ago that the new disguise, the new wording, not disguise, the new wording, the new verbatim, the new narrative of anti-Semitism was linked to Israel. And I remember having written the following, which is absolutely crucial in the debates of today. The question is not to know if anti-Zionism is or not a form of anti-Semitism, or the question is not to know if at which condition anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. This debate we hear everywhere. You know, what is the difference between anti-Zionism and legitimate criticism of Israel? We all know that. This is easy question. The real question, I said 50 years ago, and which is still more than ever true, is that the only way for anti-Semitism to survive, to revitalize itself, to gain force, to attract people, to be again a magnet for the worst, the only way, the only word, the only wording is anti-Zionism. Question is not, is anti-Zionism or not anti-Semitism? The question is, can anti-Semitism be something else today than anti-Zionism? And the question is no. There is no other way. It's a logical reasonment. If you pretend today to be an anti-Semite because you accuse the Jews to have killed Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago, no client, nobody to follow you. Who cares today? It's a fact. Few people, a sect of crazy people will probably continue to say that this is an unforgivable crime. If you come in the street of Paris, Berlin, wherever, to say that you hate the Jews because conversely they invented the Christ. They are the people of the Christ, and you are a man of enlightenment like Voltaire. You hate religion, you hate bigotry, and you observe that the root of bigotry, the one who produced the Christ, is the Jewish people. Again, who cares? This was an important fuel of the anti-Semitism of the 18th century. It will no longer be. It was the crucial point at the time of Voltaire and others, the great Voltaire. This idea of the Christ deserving to be hated, and the fact that the Christ was a Jew and that therefore the Jews deserve to be hated, was the center of the debate. Today, finished. If you say, as at the end of the 19th century, that the Jews deserve to be hated because they compose a special race with some physical peculiarities and so on, if you, as pseudo-scientists said at the time of the blooming of the science of the living, again, it will not make an audience, it will not work, and so on. The only way today to reattract that old hatred, the oldest hatred, it was said, the only way to reattract and rebuild this mob, this cloud mob, is the way of anti-Zionism. If you are able to say that the Jews are complicit, the Jews all over the world are complicit with the state, if you are able to prove that this state is a state of apartheid and genocide, if you are able to prove, even over that this state was based on a lie, which is the lie of the Holocaust, then the Jews become the most criminal people on earth. And then you have thousands, dozens of thousands, millions of people all over the world who think that with good faith, with good reasons, you have to, and you are reasonable to be anti-Semite. And this is the crucial point of this one. And this is not new, again. This dates from decades. I wrote that, I refound this text 50 years ago already. And this is exactly what is happening today. There is, of course, this rise of anti-Semitism, which you discussed during 3 days, not in France, not in Europe, all over the world. And even and more in the very country which was supposed to be, till recently, one of the two safe havens for the Jews in the world. One is Israel, the other one was United States of America. Today, the wave of anti-Zionism, the wave of demonization of the state of Israel, the wave consisting in saying that the Jews are all complicit with apartheid and genocide, arrives to the limits and inside the core of United States. I made recently, 1.5 years ago, a tour of most of the most important campuses in America, from west to east, from north to south. I decided to confront these mobs of students chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and I decided also to try to give reconfort to the Jewish students who were celebrating Shabbat with fear in their belly. And I saw that. I saw the extent of the contamination. I saw these thousands of young spirits, not worse than what I was when I was their age, really believing that they were acting for the good, really animated by the creed that they were favoring the harassed and the most weak people on earth, really believing that they are on the good side of history, and hating me, hating you, hating Jews, and probably, certainly, ready to make the ground possible for new October 7, new huge pogroms, if not worse. Again, not in the name of the bad, not in the name of hatred. All these students whom I met in Michigan, in Ohio, in Los Angeles, on the East Coast, they did not properly say, I hate Jews. They said, I love, not I hate, I love Palestinians, victims, damned of the earth, and so on and so on. And I hate apartheid, blah, blah, blah. So I saw that, I knew that since 50 years, but I felt it physically. This very special sort of hatred, which is based on, grounded in, rooted inside, a sort of alleged love. And this was really freezing. This was really chilling, this feeling. And I experienced that for weeks in these campuses. So today, all over the Western world, all over the Deep South, which means at the end of the day, all around the world, you have a new faith, a new religion, a new way to unite people, which is based on the stone, the founding stone of anti-Semitism. And I said this morning to a journalist who told me, but he told me there is a big wave of anti-Semitism in France, so what should the French Jews do? Should they do as their grandfathers in the 30s to migrate from France? I said, maybe, but to go where? In the 30s, you could come here and build a yishuv, which you still can. You could go to the United States, as Leo Strauss did, as Ernst Kantorowicz will do at the end of so many people, like Raymond Aron did, but today, it's the whole world, including the United States, which is contaminated by this distortion of mind, which consists in hating with the words of a pretended love. So this is the situation of this moment, a worldwide wave of hatred. And what you just said, Madam, about the sexual atrocities, about the will not to believe, the will not to know, not the will to know, as Michel Foucault said, la volonté de savoir, the will not to know, the refusal to know. This was in France, it was in America, it was all over the world, it was in the UN. In the UN, the will not to know, the will not to see, the will not to see, the will not to have. It was a worldwide, not decision, but a worldwide sort of decision, not to pay attention to these Jewish female victims of October 7, with so few exceptions. And I saw that in America, in these campuses, real academics, great teachers, who said me, eyes in eyes, after your report was public, that they did not believe, or that it was not without reason, or that it was not without context, and so on and so on. This is worldwide. Third remark, before going to question, all that I just said might sound pessimistic, or might sound as a reason to be despaired, which it is not. I am not, as for myself, I'm not despaired at all. I'm not even pessimistic. I believe that we, the Jews, we, the friends of the state of the nation of Israel and of the state of Israel, and Israel itself, even the non-Jews who are our friends, we are engaged in a huge ideological and political battle at the scale of the world, not the area, not Europe, the world, face to face, to the last blood with those who share the narrative which I just summarized before. And when you have a battle, when you have a civilization war, not the civilization war as some American scholars say, not in the sense of Huntington, of course not one religion against the other one, not Muslims against Judeo. I don't believe in that at all, and we might speak of that in the discussion. But civilization war between those who believe that the Jews should have no place to be, no place to remain, no place to rest in the world on one side, and those who believe that the world without the Jews would not be worldable, if I dare say, would not be worth a world still without the Jews. This is the question. A world with Jews or the world without Jews? A world without Jews, there are some people in the world who think that the world without Jews will be a non-world, would be the end of the world, would be something like the end of the world as we know it, on one side. On the other side, you have more and more people who believe that a world without Jews is wishable, that one should wish a world where Jews as Jews don't exist any longer. A world with Jews, okay, but at the condition that they don't pretend to be Jews any longer, at the condition that there is nothing to remind the world that they have been Jews, under the condition that they themselves forget what having been a Jew or being a Jew means. This is the other part of the battle. Those who believe that a world without Jews will not be a world, those who believe on the other side that one should wish a world where Jews as Jews have no place any longer. This battle, as any political battle, as many ideological battles, my generation had to wage one or two other battles in our history. The previous generation had to wage also some ideological battles. You never know if you lose or if you win. And of course, if you never know, it means that you can win. The generation of my father, of our fathers, Mr. Mayer, they had to face and to wage probably the most terrible battle against the last form, the wildest form of Amalek, which was Hitlerism, and they won at the end of the day at a terrible cost for the Jews and for humanity, of course, but they won. The Jewish people, who is a little more older than even us, Mr. Mayer, had to wage some much more difficult battle than the one that, and the Jewish people survived, flourished, bloomed, and is today the talented people which you described in your introduction address. So I personally think, and I deeply believe, that the war is on. The troops, the spiritual troops and political troops are on the ground, and that the outcome is absolutely impossible to decide. And I think that if the Jews and their friends are A, strong enough, B, wise enough, if they are Achilles and Ulysses at the same time, strong and wise, if they combine the two sorts of virtues which the Jewish people embodied so many times in his history, I think that we will not only survive, which is not an achievement, we will win. And I really believe that it is possible. And I could elaborate that in with precise examples. I think that Israel, if it keeps strong and is more wise, can win. I really believe that in France, anti-Semites who are not wise at all, who are moronic, the most stupid people in my country, and who are not so strong because they don't have institutions with them and so on, will lose. And I think the same in America. I really believe that even if you have the great city of New York was fallen under the spell of a young anti-Semite of the most miserable sort, and even if you have a strong MAGA basis which revives the cliches, the old topics of the worst of the anti-Semitism of the 30s, which is the cliché of the Jews warmongers, the Jews responsible for. This is a very strong combination, but it can be defeated. And I really believe, knowing a little America, that the real America can defeat these two recent phenomena. So the battle is going on. It can be won, and I really believe that we will win it with, again, real force, which is not the force of only of the fist and of the armies, but the force of the mind, and with intelligence and wisdom. These were my preliminary remarks, my dear.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your very, very strong and I will say maybe a bit also concerning and I think it joins some of the language we heard from Professor Deborah Lipstadt earlier this week, that this really is a time of challenge, that we really need to kind of, also following on what Kochav said, change the language of what we are addressing and what we are dealing with. In a book you wrote in 2018, you spoke about the 5 kings from Abraham and Lot. And I just want to kind of address what I think is a bit prophetic in your address there. You spoke also both about the reestablishment of the caliphate and you related Hamas to that, but also about Turkey and Iran that we're seeing like emerging now as forces. But I actually wanted to ask you about our allies. Our allies. You said you ended with describing this war we are between the 5 kings, and who are our allies? Who can we trust?
We have many allies. I would like to quote 3 which come to my mind. Those who still believe in liberal and democratic values, those who still believe that a society can work with ethnical variety, with people coming from all over the world and composing a nation just by creed, which is exactly Israel. Israel is a pluri-ethnic society with people coming from America, from Europe, from Russia, from Africa, from Arab countries, and which nearly overnight in 1948 made a nation. It is a model of a liberal birth of a nation. So those who believe in true liberalism, those who believe that people can live together, whatever is their origin, ethnicity, and so on, these are our natural allies, the natural allies of the Jewish people and of the state of the Jews. Number 1. Number 2, I would say that today a lot of, maybe a majority of Christians, and especially of Catholics, are the allies of the Jews. Because we all know the bad news. I quoted a few, and you probably elaborated a lot in the last days. But there is one, in the last 75 years, there was one very, very good news. There was one, not unnoticed, but not memorized revolution. Maybe one of the most important revolutions of the 20th centuries, which is nearly forgotten, but which is a real revolution with real achievement and which did not turn into its contrary. This revolution is the Council, the Vatican Council of Vatican II, Vatican II. This revolution the Council of Vatican II consisted in long weeks, months, years of discussions between cardinals, between Catholic scholars on various points. And especially a big part of it was the relationship between the Catholics and the rest of the faith, the rest of the religions. So they discussed at that time, in the 50s, they discussed the question of relationship between the Catholics and the Muslims. They made a great proceeding. They discussed about the relationship between Catholics and the Buddhists. It was relatively easy, and they arrived at a great statement. They discussed about the relationship between Protestants and evangelicals and so on, and Catholics. It took time, but it was not so. And then they discussed, it was the last point, the most difficult. the longest discussions between, about this relationship between Catholics and the Jews. This question was, if you look at the verbatim of Vatican II, of the encyclic Nostra Aetatum, it was the longest discussion, the most difficult, and the conclusion consisted in 2 lines, not pages, as for the Buddhist or for other faith. About the Jews and the Catholics, it was weeks of debates, concluding in 2 lines, and not even 2 lines, 2 words, 2 words. The result of the discussion was to say, the best of the Catholics, the best, since decades and centuries, those who accepted the Jews, who did not want to kill them, those who, on the way of crusades, met them and did not kill, decided to spare their lives. These believed that the Jews were the fathers of the Christians, the fathers. The cardinal said, the best of ours, the best of the Catholics, believe that as they were our fathers, they were due to die. We, the Catholics, are due to inherit from them, but in due time, when it happens, we should not haste the process. And the cardinal said, no, this was a mistake. The Jews are not the fathers of the Catholics. The Torah is not the ancient testament compared to the New Testament, the first one having to disappear naturally in order to let the space for the new one. No, they are, and it was the introduction of this word was a complete revolution. The Jews are not the fathers, they are the brothers of the Catholics. Brothers. Between brothers, you can have conflict, you can have war, you can have, and we know a lot of examples, one brother can kill the other, of course. But it is a relationship between equals. It is not a relationship between the old, which will die sooner or later, and the new, who will inherit. It is a relationship of equality. These 2 lines conclusion, these 2 words conclusion of this long discussion produced a real revolution, spiritual revolution and political revolution among Catholics. Except, of course, a few sects at the margin of the Catholic Church. The huge majority of the Catholics really believe, since then, really believe that there is a brotherly relationship of equality with a fair discussion maybe between the Jews and themselves. And on the Catholic side, you have people like François Mauriac, or in France, or I don't know, John Kerry in America. On the Jewish side, you have Emmanuel Levinas, and but you have a fair, equal, sometimes difficult discussion between 2 brothers. And this does not mean, of course, that the Christian Catholic anti-Semitism has disappeared, but it means that the most important driving force of this anti-Semitism, which is the Jews are due to disappear. This is a normal course of history, and we just have to haste, we just have to make quick the process. This has lost all its dogmatic, all its spiritual legitimacy among the Catholics. Since then, so it took time, it did not happen in one day. It took years, maybe dozens of years, to produce the totality of its results. But look around you, I look at least around me, the best allies we have, we the Jews, the best allies I have in France are very often some Catholics who have listened to the lesson of Vatican II and who know that the Jews are their brothers in heart and spirit. Third example of allies, the Muslim people, the Muslim citizens of Haifa here, the representative, those who believe in Europe and in France in an Islam which can live with, work with democracy and liberal values, those among the Muslims who believe that the religion should not be part of the making of the law, that it is a question of personal life and creed and so on. The Muslims of some Muslim countries, I could quote Morocco. I could quote in Europe Bosnia Herzegovina, which I know from very very close. I could quote in Afghanistan all those who oppose the Taliban, who still resist Taliban, all the inheritors of a man whom I knew relatively well in my youth, Commandant Massoud, who was a true Muslim, pious, a believer, praying, and who really and deeply believed that as the Catholic of after Vatican II, that the Jews were his brothers, and there was not any seminal necessary hatred between the two. Commandant Massoud, I had discussions with him about the real message of the Torah, about the question of knowing if there is one humanity or two, and that if there is one, this is a quote of Massoud, if there is one humanity, then why would there be an eternal war? And if not, if we really believe that Muslims and the Jews are in war forever, it means that there is two different humanities, or that all the message, monogenetic message of the Torah was false, and so on. So the Muslims who believe in enlightenment, who believe that it was a big mistake for Islam not to embrace at the right moment the enlightenment, but it is still time to catch up. The Catholics, which I mentioned, the real Democrats and liberals, all the three are possible and devoted allies of the Jews, and I think that the Jews can count of them in the battle which I described.
Thank you very much. I'm also very, very glad you added the Muslim. I think it's a very, very strong aspect that we see in Israel, within the relationships within Israel, and sometimes not always obvious outside. I'll say maybe about the Catholics, we're a bit stuck between Biden and J.D. Vance. So Biden was also Catholic, right? So not to go deeply, there's a lot to be discussed here. And of course, the classical liberalism that you kind of discuss. I want a specific question that relates to our region and to Haifa, also for our friend the mayor. Haifa is very well known to be a multicultural city and a city of 5 religions. Even Herzl wrote about this. Including the Druze. And I want to ask you a specific question about the Druze community, which is very dear to our hearts here in Haifa and at the University of Haifa. And I know you've done a lot of work with minorities across the Middle East. You've documented them, you've written about them, you've spoken on their behalf. And now we have the horrors of Sweda. What can you say for the fate of the Druze? Is statehood maybe a path forward in this time? what can these kind of minorities do in the Middle East at the time, especially the Druze that I say are really our brothers, if I can use that term here in Haifa, and we deeply care for them?
A state, honestly, I don't know. I have some experience on this question of minorities in the area, but I'm not experienced on all. If you ask me about the Kurds, I would reply to you with experience and knowledge. About the Druze, statehood or not, I really cannot express myself. What I know, there was a book in the time of the Soviet totalitarianism by a Czech thinker called La solidarité des ébranlés, the solidarity of the shaken, the solidarity of the little peoples, the solidarity of the small peoples, small nations oppressed by the empires. And what I strongly believe is that there should be, and it would be a good politic to help to take form, a solidarity, a natural solidarity with in this area, between the Jews, between the Kurds, between the Armenians, between the Druze, and between other minority. I really believe that they have common enemies, that they have shared interests, and that what I called before a wise politic, a politic of Ulysses more than Achilles, should try to build this alliance of the minorities with Israel, or maybe with the help of Israel, or maybe with Israel as a political center or a spiritual center. But for the Middle East, and probably for the world, this solidarity between the shaken is a natural thing, a necessity, and a weapon to win against those which you mentioned before, the five kings, which is the new imperial forces of our time, the five new imperialisms of today, which are not the imperialisms of the old times. America is less and less is a paper tiger more and more, with the teeth broken. Russia is a strong empire. China is still retaining its forces, but is a huge virtual empire. Turkey is a real empire, with aggressive wills clearly expressed against all his neighbors. Iran is, of course, was till the last weeks, and might still be, or might become again, if it is given the means to do it, a very strong empire. And the Sunni radical Islamic states, going from, an example is Afghanistan of today, they are naturally imperialistic. They really believe in very large and as large as possible Ummah. These are the empires. Against these empires, I believe in this solidarity between the shaken.
So I think also there's a lot of soccer going on now. So we have five kings, and I think you now presented the fourth ally. The shaken, the small shaken states are the fourth ally, okay? So we need one more ally, and it's 5-5, and maybe we have a chance for a draw at least, right? So I want to move to a last question for now. We've prepared a lot for you, but I want you to ask you specifically now on anti-Semitism in relation to this conference and to relation to the people that we have here. So we have a large group of scholars here that are, dealing with anti-Semitism, feeling very isolated, maybe in their worlds and where they are. Part of your journey has also been in relation to the left and to the intellectual left and to the understanding of anti-Semitism in the left. Two questions. Were you surprised by the current anti-Semitism's origin in the left, specifically in that form of anti-Semitism? And what is your recommendation for us as scholars of anti-Semitism? Where should we put our attention now? What should we be looking at?
Surprised? Of course not. Number one, because left and right is not a relevant dividing line as far as anti-Semitism is concerned. It's not the point, right or left. If you look at the building of the Nazi ideology in the 20s and 30s of the 20th century, it is very hard to know if the driving forces of the new ideology were coming from the left or from the right. It was, if you remember, that the Nazi party was built by national Bolsheviks on one side, and conservative revolutionaries on the other side, and that the two forces merged to make the Nazi party. What is the right? What is the left? It is not relevant. And first and second reason, when you look at for example, France, we have an old experience of left-wing anti-Semitism. At the time of the Dreyfus affair, the condemnation of Captain Dreyfus on false documents and so on, half of France was anti-Semitic. It was a huge wave of hatred. But the left, the Socialist Party, was a very important part of this tide. And there is no, I don't know what is the proportion, but certainly half of the left was contaminated at that time by anti-Semitism. In France, you had two great names of the Socialist Party in the time of the Dreyfus affair. Jean Jaurès, and a man called Jules Guesde. They were the two. Jean Jaurès started at the beginning of Dreyfus affair. I don't know if I can say anti-Semitic, but anti-Dreyfus for sure. And then he changed because he thought, he reflected, he made the work which I mentioned. And the other one, Jules Guesde, was anti-Dreyfus, anti-Semite, driving his conviction of the guiltiness of Dreyfus from the fact that he was a Jew till the end. So it's not news, you know. People do as if this appearance of a left-wing anti-Semitism in Europe was big news. No, it's an old story. It's a very, very, very old story. What should we do to reply step by step, not to leave in a inch of the ground to the adversary? I still believe in ideas. I still believe in truth. I still believe that even in the age of post-truth, where we are, truth can prevail. I still believe that. I did that all my life. I mentioned this tour of American universities. There was some moments of this tour when I just explained to the young ignorant whom I had in front of me and who were screaming Israel apartheid. I just explained them that 20% of the population of this country, and even more of Haifa, are not Jews, that they are Arabs, that a lot of them, majority of them are Muslims, and that they have all the civic rights of the other. I explained that, and they were very surprised, did not know. They did not know that 1 out of 5 citizens of Israel, with all the rights of Israel, was Arab. Did not know. When you explain that clearly, with facts, with people hear, people listen. When you explain to these students of Penn University or Harvard, of Columbia, when you explain them that this colonial state, which Israel is supposed to be, was born from, did take its birth from an anti-colonial struggle, won, achieved, victorious from the empire of that time, which was the British Empire, and from the failed empire of that time, which was the Nazi Empire, and that Israel is the fruit, the product, the fruit of an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist struggle, reaching its target and relatively faithful to its outcome. People are surprised, but it is a fact that the anti-colonial values are more alive in large parts of the Israeli society than in many countries of the world. So you have to explain. You have to battle. You have to speak louder than your opponents. I have examples of before this tour. I remember a big meeting in University of San Francisco. Maybe 100, maybe 1,000 of students. A big part of them were hunting at that time. It was 10 years ago. Hunting Israeli vessels on the first application on the internet to prevent them from downloading their goods on the harbors of San Francisco or of Seattle and blah, blah, blah. They were hunting, literally. Vessel hunters, Israeli vessels hunters. And when I explained them, they shouted loud, but I shouted louder. And I shouted more loud that they were expressing themselves like the inventors of the boycott of the Jews, who were the last Nazis after the survivors of Nazis after 1945. When you explain that, at least you have a part of them who listen, who hear, who speak a little less loud, you know, and discussions start. So this is what I recommend.
Thank you. So really, Bernard, you've been very, very generous with your time with us, and we were planning maybe some Q&A with the crowd, but I think maybe we will conclude, and if some people want to maybe come over and maybe have a question or two. And also, you've been very, very generous with the book and with having us have the book published in Hebrew. So your words also now reverberate also in Israel and in Hebrew, you know, in the language. And I also think that your words reverberate now for us. You know, you've sent your words to a very large group of scholars, which will take this forward into all the work that we have been doing. So thank you very much, Mr. Bernard-Henri Lévy. So this is also recorded, I want to say, so we will be distributing it both, you know, in shorter clips for the younger generations and the students, and in longer form for the mayors and the elder generations. And if anybody wants to maybe come over and ask, is that okay with you? Maybe we'll just, do you want a question from the crowd now, or maybe just have people come over? What is your What is your calling? Okay, great. So let's. We have some time. We have a microphone somewhere out here, which is for people who want to come and ask questions. You can just. Amit, please.
Maybe we take 2 or 3 questions?
Yes, take 2 or 3. Can we take them together, right? Maybe it's better? Okay. So let's take 2, 3 questions.
Thank you. When Dr. Bar-Gorditsky asked you about the allies and enemies, and you portrayed the new world, there was one missing power that is close to you, I believe. You didn't mention Europe, and I think we all guess why, but I would like you to say a little thing about how do you see Europe in the question of relation to the Jews and its place in the world in general.
Great, thank you. Chad, I see you're also standing there, right?
Monsieur Henri Lévy, thank you so much for being here tonight and for your inspiration tonight and always. You referenced tonight several times liberal democratic values. I know that you started your career as a fierce critic of totalitarianism. I would be interested if you could share your thoughts about the relationship between 2 trends which seem to be concurrent. Rising anti-Semitism on the one hand, and a kind of democratic backsliding, democratic erosion in many parts of the world on the other hand. Intuitively, I feel that they are connected. I would be very interested to hear your thoughts about that connection.
Thank you. Maybe just one third comment or question from Mr. Benassi. Dr. Benassi.
Abdullah Benassi du Maroc. J'aimerais bien vous intervenir en français, Monsieur Bernard-Henri Lévy, et je vous demande qu'est-ce que vous en pensez à propos de l'antisémitisme en Europe en général, vu la situation actuelle en Europe. Qu'est-ce que sera l'avenir du judaïsme européen en voyant la situation actuelle en Europe? Merci.
So the 3 questions are about Europe. Yes, I hear that. Of course, Europe could be, I would not say an empire, but Europe could be, if it wills, could be a huge strength. Europe has the capacity as an entity to confront each of the 5 empires which I mentioned, and especially one which I studied carefully, which is the Russian Empire. Europe is the natural, could be, if it wanted, the natural opponent, the natural and strongest adversary of the Russian Empire in Ukraine. If Europe had the will, Europe would have had the means since the first minute to stop the war in Ukraine. This terrible war, which I know a little, I filmed it during since 4 years. I made 4 films about this war. I know the ground, the front lines, and so on and so on. This is such an absurd, terrible, shameful war, but also a stupid one. Because if Europe had the will, which means the political will, Europe had the capacity to stop Putin at the minute. Europe is the power of Putin is the power of one of the 27 states, is the power of Spain. The wealth of Russia, the gross product of Russia is equal to the gross product of Spain, which is not the weakest, but one of the strong of the 27 of Europe. So Europe, if it had the will, which means if it was the political entity which it should be, had the power at the first minute to stop and to win this war. If Europe had come to rescue its Ukrainian sister, this country who longed for Europe, who wished for Europe, which declared its love for European values since the beginning of the war. If Europe had had the reflex, the will to come to rescue, the war would have been finished immediately. But we don't have the will. Europe does not want to be this power. Europe does not want to make equal game with America, with China, and does not want to dominate Russia for many reasons. Some are good reasons. There is in Europe the memory of some of the moments when Europe wanted to be an empire, Napoleon or Hitler. It was a will for empire, and Europeans remember that this is bad memory for Europe and a memory of crimes and blood, but also some bad reasons, and these, alas, are the most important, because Europe does not believe any longer, or does not believe anymore, or does not believe enough in its own values and creeds. And this is so clear about in the war in Ukraine. You have European people, Ukraine, who believes in the values of Europe, who is ready to take risks in order to defend these values, who is ready to die sometimes, too often, for the sake of these values. These are the Ukrainians. And you have the biggest part of Europe who is not willing to take any risk in order to defend its own values. So this is Europe today. It has the power to be this, let's say, this empire for good, but there is not this will for empire. About the Jews, Europe has been what we all know. Europe has been the epicenter, the center of gravity of the worst crime committed against the Jews. The crime was worldwide. There were Nazis in Japan, in North America, in Arab countries. But the core of this criminal will, the core of this criminal madness was in Europe, for sure. In Germany, with seeds in other parts of Europe, ideological seeds, including France. So there is this stain in Europe. There is this huge hole, like a hole of an atomic bomb who would have made a huge hole on the surface of Earth. Europe is haunted by this crime committed in common, and which is the last fruit, venomous, of course, hideous, of Europe. Europe united itself in a way 1 century ago, united itself, believed in Europe, but in order to get rid of this this name and those who incarnated this name, who were the Jews. So there is that, and there is no European citizen who does not have this in his mind. And even if he is not aware, who is not haunted haunted by this memory. On the other side, we all know, we Europeans, we all know that without the Jews, there would not be Europe at all. We all know, not Jews, all Europeans, we all know that the Nazi crime was not only a crime, but was a suicide. It was a suicide of Europe. Because Europe without Jewish writers, Europe without Jewish thinkers, Europe without Jewish culture would just not have been Europe. It is one of the ferment, one of the grain, one of the seeds, and maybe one of the most rich seeds, if not the one of Europe. Thinkers, Talmudic thinkers of European origin and so on. So, what is the place of the Jews? It is the place in Europe. It is the place of the ghost. It is the place of the seed, and it is the place of the soul. Part of the soul of Europe is Jewish. The ghost of Europe, a sort of guiltiness for all Europeans, are the Jews. And one of the richest, most fécond, comment on dit fécond, fécondité? Fertile. One of the most fertile seeds of Europe is the Jewish soul. So Jews are here all over in Europe. And Europe without Jews would probably follow the destiny which was promised to her by the authors of the final solution, which is suicide. Those who want a Europe without Jews, there is a lot. The people which we talked about at the beginning, the Europeans who are who are in this new anti-Semitism, they want to get rid of the Jews. A world where Jews will not be recognizable any longer, blah, blah, blah. They want that. But they just don't know that Europe as a spiritual, cultural, political, ethnical body would disappear at the same time. No Europe without the Jews. Europe was close to suicide, close to one glance before, one blinking, 1 inch from suicide. Once Europe is again marching towards suicide in its rabid hatred against the Jews. I think Europe, if we are wise enough, if we are strong enough, us liberals, us Democrats, us real believers in Europe, they will be stopped before jumping in the abyss. Because anti-Semitism and the victory of anti-Semitism would be abyss for Europe and for its civilization. I hope I replied to your question.
There was the question in French that I was not sure. Maybe
the question in French was relatively the same, and
okay,
I tried to reply to.
That's the level of my French. So.
No. To reply to our Moroccan friend, precisely, there is a temptation among European Jews to leave, of course. And I hear more and more French people or European people in general who think that Europe is a place where a Jew cannot breathe any longer and that the Jews should leave. I respect their choice, of course, and they probably experience the situation is in another way than mine. My position is different. Number one, I think that the battle can still be won. And not only can still, but will probably be won. I really believe that. And number two, I really believe that if one should leave France, if one should leave, if one has to leave, it is not me, it is those who want me to leave. You know, some of my ancestors, at least my father, did a little to allow France to be a free democracy. He was a freedom fighter in the French Free Army. He was a hero of one of the most difficult and deadly battle of the war against Hitler, the Battle of Monte Cassino. His children deserve to be French also for that reason. Those who hate me, hate France, hate Europe, hate liberal values, hate democratic values, hate equality between women and men, hate values of secularism, and so on, honestly, if one has to live, it's more likely to be him or them than me.
Thank you very much.